Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, July 26th, the end of yet another historic and dramatic week in this country. We have a lot to discuss, so let me get right to introducing you to our insider panel this week. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward, Eric Sonderman, columnist with Colorado Politics and the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazettes, Elena Alvarez, reporter with Axios Denver, and Chris Rourke, consultant with Rourke Media. President Biden spoke to this country Wednesday night following his Sunday online announcement that he would not continue his bid for re-election. With just, 3 months to go now before Election Day, he has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. And this week, Colorado's Democratic Convention delegates endorsed her as well in a straw poll. I will start with you, Patty.
Well, what a difference a week makes. We were sitting here last week just wondering if and when he would decide he wasn't running. And Amber McReynolds, the election expert, was here and thought it would be a little time yet. But then kablooey, he did it between Jared Polis being on CNN and Jared Polis being on CNN on Sunday. So there was a lot of FaceTime of Jared Polis this week. But I was thinking back to 16 years ago when Barack Obama was nominated as president. Democratic candidate for president here in Denver, and Joe Biden was his running mate. And at the time, Joe Biden was eligible for Social Security. He was already 65. So when you think about it, he has had a long, august service. Definitely time for him to go. His speech was lovely, well-crafted, but it definitely showed he would not really be up to the job, I don't think, 4 years from now. I think he can finish the job, but it's time for him to enjoy his grandchildren.
The big question is now, and I addressed it in the column that I just wrote and will run this weekend, is Harris the optimal candidate? I mean, obviously she will be the candidate Democrats rallied around. I equated this to Democrats. They were so dispirited. It was like they were on a ship that sunk in the middle of the ocean and they just grabbed the first available lifeboat without checking if that lifeboat is really seaworthy. And we will see if Harris has what it takes to pull this off. She's been off to a reasonably strong start, but ultimately this election is going to be decided in 3 Rust Belt states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. There really is no Democratic path to an electoral college win that doesn't include all 3 of them. They have to go 3 for 3 on those states. The question is Kamala Harris the right person to bring those Rust Belt states back into the blue column? You know, the old pundits dodge, time will tell, but time will tell here. Color me a little bit dubious that this was the right move to just anoint her as to put her through some process where her nomination, if it ended up on her, would be more legitimized, where she would have had to shown her mettle, where she would be a little more tested.
Okay, Elena.
So my colleague, John Frank, and I dove into Kamala Harris's record in Colorado in a story this week, and we found that she's been sowing campaign seeds in Colorado for years, dating back to her 2020 presidential bid. That is when she started building a solid base of support, particularly among women, and that year she actually raised more than $350,000 in Colorado, which was actually one of the highest totals nationwide in any state. Since 2020, she's also been here a lot. So in a 15-month period, she visited Colorado 4 times, the most recent of which was this past May when she was the commencement speaker at the Air Force Academy. And she also has another local connection. This is just a fun fact, but her stepson actually graduated from Colorado College in 2017. So, you know, considering that she's been here a lot, she's been sowing these seeds, her standing here is strong. She obviously has the support from our Democratic Convention delegates. And I think there's really no doubt, obviously, that she'll win Colorado, assuming, you know, she is the nominee. But these swing states will be watching really, really closely. Those matter the most.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
Yeah, I watched President Biden give his speech. It was sad. I found it sad. But one thing really caught my attention. He said that the names at the top of the ticket have changed, but the mission has not. And when I get my ballot, I get a ballot of names. I don't necessarily get a ballot or vote for a mission. So I'm really curious about what is behind all of that. Another thing that came out, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert sent out what I think was a joke, a silver alert on Joe Biden. written in a way that you could mistake it for being something serious, but apparently it was a joke. It was on congressional letterhead. Do with that what you will, perhaps a misuse of office. But then the thing that's so sad about that situation is anyone who has had a loved one suffer from dementia or cognitive decline, no one finds that funny. And so it's unfortunate to see the Congresswoman kind of engaged in these tactics, especially when she just fought through a primary and has to go on for re-election in the 4th.
Wanted to mention the numbers are incredible. The first day, $100 million raised by Kamala. But I thought the more interesting number is voter registration went up 700% in one day. And then when you talk about passing the torch, as Biden did, to a new generation, you're also getting a group of people who had been very disenfranchised, not engaged, and most of the people who registered were under 35. So if we actually have a lot of interest in this upcoming election with people voting, it's all for the good.
When it comes to Colorado politics, the level of drama and variability still remains very high, Eric.
I'll go in a couple directions, try to do it quickly. The mess of the Colorado Republican Party, it knows no end. We'll see if it comes to a head this coming weekend when I guess there is a meeting scheduled, but they keep scheduling meetings and then dispute the validity of the meeting and whether it was called by the right cadre or the right clique of the party. Dave Williams, I don't know what part of rejection he doesn't understand. I mean, he's been rejected at every level, most prominently recently by the voters in that congressional district he was seeking by a 2-to-1 margin. Real quick shift. We also had an announcement of a legislator, Jennifer Parenti from Boulder County, who announced after 2 years in the legislature she was giving up her re-election bid, was going to walk off into sunset because of the toxic atmosphere under the dome and within the Democratic caucus. This is now the third such Democratic legislator to do this in the past couple of years. There's a message there. Politics is not what it used to be around here. It is much more of a blood sport, and some people ought to take this to heart.
Elena.
No, absolutely. I was going to echo what Eric said about Parenti. I think it really reflects, obviously, a bigger problem that we've been talking about plenty at this table is the toxic culture. And I had actually read that in 2023, there were 7 legislators that ended up resigning, which was the most since staff have been tracking resignations in 2017, and a lot of that was due to the toxic culture. Something I'll be interested in, Representative Elizabeth, or I should say former Representative Elizabeth Epps, was often blamed for a lot of the vitriol and just toxicity that existed. And considering she just lost, I'll be really curious to see if there's any, sense of calm, greater sense of calm brought to the Capitol in this upcoming legislative session. But so far, it's a little bit disappointing just to see our lawmakers. And you're losing good people who, she said she wanted to keep her sense of integrity and she just couldn't in the current culture. And, it's really disappointing and sad for voters.
It is. Chris?
Well, statewide, or a state race I'm looking at on the Western Slope is House District 58. And apparently they have just now decided who the Republican candidate will be. It's Larry Don Suckla, and he won by, count them, 3 votes. 3 votes. It's interesting in this race because 400 ballots were lost, apparently, in the mail system that were headed for Dolores County. More than 100 people went and got replacement ballots to vote. But what's interesting is Suckla goes forward and he's going to face a Democrat candidate, Kathleen Curry. And what is fascinating about this candidate is she's a very moderate Democrat. She is great on water, great on ag, as far as what that district would want. It's a conservative-leaning district. She's also pro-Second Amendment, a Democrat that's pro-Second Amendment with the allowance and the understanding that we really need to do more on the mental health end of things. Can she turn that district back to a Democrat when we're losing Democrats, and we're talking about whether or not the supermajority goes away? She has the potential of flipping that to a Democratic district, so got all eyes on that.
Patty?
It's going to be so hard to pay attention to every single race in November because you've got all the state legislative races. You have the endless ballot measures, and I know we're going to get more into that, even before you get to the congressional races, which Lauren Boebert continues to be an eternal disgrace at this table. But the Republican Party is impossible to top. As Eric said, we're going to have, there was a meeting on the 19th sort of held under a bridge, which you kind of like. It's like trolls. But maybe that one wasn't a real meeting, and now they're having the meeting on Saturday. And I can only hope that out of this, Dave Williams decides it's time to pick a different career and let the Republican Party try to rebuild. Politics is better when there are two strong parties that are fielding good candidates and supporting the good candidates as opposed to supporting the wackadoos rather than anybody reasonable coming out.
And there are some voices coming out saying, I would be happy to take over the GOP party.
And a guy also from El Paso County, Eli Bremer, announced on Thursday, I believe this week, that he would be willing to step in. He is plenty conservative. No one's going to ever mistake Eli for being other than a true red conservative. But he's not crazy. He's not a conspiracy theory guy. He doesn't, worship every pebble that Donald Trump walks on. And he would be a very credible party chair.
Okay.
Deborah Flores is another name, too, that's out there.
Okay. All right. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston delivered his first State of the City address this week. And in Axios Denver, it was written like this: Johnston is positioning himself as the city's savior. Elena, the following day, after that address, the city council, a committee within the city council, kind of pushed back on one of his big ideas for this next year.
That's right. Okay, so let's back up. Let's talk about the State of the City address for just a second. I've covered numerous State of the Cities, State of the States. I just have to say, I think this one took the cake for, being the most grandiose as far as language goes. It was very theatrical. It literally was, it took place in a theater. One of the quotes that cracked me up that we quoted in our story was, "Here in this capital of the New West, where the mountains are tall and the rivers are deep, problems are solvable, and we are the ones to solve them." I mean, it was very over the top. In his speech, he, of course, touted all the work that he's done over the past year, including homelessness, unsurprisingly. He laid out a few new plans, including a new police program that I'm a little bit confused about. Sounds like community policing, but considering the police department's really strapped for resources, I don't know how that's going to work. But he also took time to double down on this pitch to raise taxes for affordable housing that he's trying to get on the November ballot, and that's where that roadblock comes in. So council members in a committee meeting decided to press pause on this. This happened just a couple days ago. They said there's so many details missing. It's simply rushed. I mean, he introduced this earlier this month, and it has to be approved by the council to make the November ballot by August 26th. So we've got, essentially a month to do it. And it really just speaks to his bigger approach when it comes to the way that he's been governing. Critics and supporters both ding him for this announce first, listen later kind of approach. He's really rushing through bold plans, and it tends to backfire. In a lot of ways, council members are still asking for a breakdown of the budget about how much his homelessness efforts cost. They still don't have any numbers. They've been whipped back and forth when it comes to the way he's handled the migrant crisis. First we're welcoming everybody, now we're only helping 1,000 people. And so this was their moment to really say, hey, let's pause for a moment until we have we actually understand how this is going to work. Their administration can't explain how exactly it's going to work. So they have, a couple weeks to really explain and woo council members to get them on board. I'm sure they probably will, but it's going to be a rushed process. It's not necessarily fair to the public, who's going to have to weigh in a public hearing before all of this gets approved.
Time is of the essence, and the city council has to pass this to go before voters in November. Right. So really, they have the last say before the voters would. Chris?
Well, and again, we started seeing this over the winter, where city council is now putting the mayor in check. He does have these big, bold plans, but they're like, wait a minute, let's talk this through. Buying buildings and, housing the homeless and all of these grand ideas that he has. And it's great to have ideas, but then now the council is pushing back. Another thing I read in your reporting, Wellington Webb, the former mayor, was concerned about this, rushing into this tax proposal. There's another tax that's going to benefit Denver Health that it would compete with. And quite frankly, and I have the quote here, the public is getting tired of taxes. That's Wellington Webb saying that. So of course, it gives you pause about whether this plan, if it does make the ballot, if everybody gets their ducks in a row and it is on there, will it pass?
Mm-hmm. People point to affordability as being a big concern, but they have to remember it's not just an affordable house. it's affording the cost of living here in Denver. And that's what they're missing when they keep putting taxes and fees on residents. And I think we talked about this last week. Johnston never mentioned another tax for affordability when he ran for mayor. He ran on the homelessness issue. He did talk about affordability. He had a plan on his platform, never talked about increasing taxes. And I think right now, given how concerned Denver residents are with paying for trash, paying for composting if they ever get their barrel, paying for residential parking, all the new things they're paying for, they are tired because they can't afford more taxes. It's not just that they can't afford the house to park in front of, they're having trouble when they go, and they don't want Denver to be the highest in the metro area for sales tax. And that's what we're looking at with this. I think it'll get pulled.
Eric.
I think what you see is what you get with Mayor Mike Johnston. As Elena pointed out, there's a grandiosity to it in terms of the speech he gave. There's sometimes an over-the-top level to it. One of the jobs of any mayor, and whether it's Federico Pena, Wellington Webb, Mike Johnston, Michael Hancock, John Hickenlooper, obviously, is to do what I call triage, to set priorities. And if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And that we're going to have at the same time on the same ballot a big tax measure for Denver Health, which didn't even get mentioned in the State of the City address, Johnston's pet affordable housing initiative, as well as the Denver Public School large billion-dollar bond issue. That is not setting priorities. That's trying to get it all at once. Mayor Webb, I thought that was a very telling statement that he put out, urging caution that we're rushing this and telling Mike Johnston basically, do your job, set some priorities.
Okay. Let's also talk about the environment this week, since this week not only is the quality of our air under attack with horrible smoke from wildfires in Oregon and Washington and Canada, so are our Colorado rivers and lakes, Chris. It's bad.
Yeah, there's been a discovery in the Colorado River. Something I'm very familiar with is zebra mussels. Now, an actual mussel was not found in the river. It was actually a larva. During some routine testing. They attach themselves to infrastructure, dams, boats, motors. They eat plankton and algae, and they compete with fish on eating, and then they take all that good stuff out of the river and deplete the oxygen supply. It's caused a lot of alarm because look at, it affects 4 other states if it goes downstream. They are going to continue to do testing, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom because I did a lot of reporting on the Blue Mesa Reservoir, and in 2010, 2011, 2012, the Blue Mesa tested positive for these kind of larvae. But in 2014, it was delisted because it didn't rise to the standard of what the concern was, and now it is considered a water body that is negative for zebra mussels. I understand the panic is real. I'm not trying to throw cold water on that. But I don't think it's time to get too far down the road and think this is a disaster.
Okay.
It could be, but perhaps not.
Okay. Patty.
Mother Nature is misbehaving everywhere. We have the whale jumping on the fishing boat in the Atlantic. We have not geysers, but just explosions in Yellowstone. I was just in Montana where I thought it could not get smokier. Montana has 60 wildfires going. Alberta has 170, and that's the smoke that first hit Montana and is now here in Denver. On Wednesday, Denver had the worst air of any city in the country. We were 12th worst in the world, ahead of Singapore, ahead of Mumbai, ahead of Wuhan, ahead of just about everyone. So I hope people, and it's not letting up yet. The only good news is the wildfires are really not that bad in Colorado compared to Oregon and Idaho and Montana. So knock on wood and behave yourself when you're out there. Make sure you don't light a campfire. Don't be careless. Let's keep Colorado as pristine as we can, even if we can't stop the smoke from coming in.
Yeah.
I guess under the heading of lifelong learning, I've learned about 2 things this week that I can't say I had ever crossed my radar before. One, to Chris's point, is about zebra mussels. And the other is a report, I think it came out of Douglas County, about, quote, staggering disease in mountain lions. I can't say I was familiar with either of those phenomenon. Lord knows Colorado Parks and Wildlife is being challenged in other ways these days, and not just with wolves, although wolves are challenge enough.
Yes.
But yeah, it certainly feels bleak right now between really smoky skies. I can't even take my dogs for a walk. We've got new outbreaks of bird flu that are, they keep coming. We've got West Nile virus cases that are infecting Coloradans much earlier than usual. We have a grasshopper invasion happening on Colorado farms, I think, on the eastern plains. And then, of course, zebra mussels. And something I also learned, I was learning about zebra mussels this week too, Eric. Something I learned is that over the course of a year, one female zebra mussel can produce 1 million larvae. So the larvae, I mean, let's hope it's just one, but it's pretty doubtful. But, there is good news. As Chris said, these can be eradicated. It's been done in different states and in our own bodies of water. And it's largely preventable. This was something else I learned, is that, a lot of this is being spread by people just not cleaning their boats, their life jackets, their kayaks. So if you properly clean, going from one body of water to another, that's really a great solution. I'm hoping Parks and Wildlife officials are able to, move quick, address this, come up with some creative solutions, because obviously the Colorado River is facing a ton of pressure from climate change and, growth in the western area.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the highs and the lows of this week. We'll start with some of the lows. This will be interesting. Patty?
Well, I've just switched because J.D. Vance, who apparently is very, does not like women who don't have children, would be all for the zebra mussel. What, 1 million larvae? But I also have to say, Denver International Airport, get a new message. It is no longer springtime in the Rockies. Maybe Mike Johnston thinks he has enough time to sell this affordability sales tax, but we are now in the dead of summer.
Yeah.
Well, I've, in the main part of the show, expressed my reservation that Kamala Harris is necessarily the strongest candidate Democrats could put forward, although she will be the nominee. But I have to say, to go online these days and see some of the Trump base and some of the Trump spokespeople going after her for, let's call it her personal life, or even who she may have slept with in much, much younger years as a single woman, is despicable and is also the height of hypocrisy, given that they're doing this on behalf of a gentleman, Mr. Trump, who, shall we say, has a rather checkered history and track record of his own in that regard, and whatever is done consensually is far different than what their standard bearer has been accused of doing.
Elena?
I got to give this one to RTD CEO Deborah Johnson. So this just came out. CBS reported that the transit agency's chief of police has been put on leave for alleged policy violations. And when a CBS reporter asked Deborah Johnson about this, she said, quote, "It's none of your concern." Considering all of the crime issues that RTD has been dealing with in recent years and the fact that it is a public agency, I found that really alarming and couldn't disagree more with her.
Well, mine happens to be RTD too.
Oh, hey.
Ah.
High five.
So my son came to visit. He lives in Gunnison, came up to visit, stay with mom, and go to the Red Sox games at the Rockies. And he rode RTD downtown, and it's normally a 45-minute ride with all the connections. Took him an hour and a half to get there because of delays. Coming home, it took 2 hours because RTD broke down, and they had to shuttle him with buses. And here we're talking at a time where we're going to put more housing next to transit so that people can get downtown, and the system is not reliable. So that's my low of the week.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something positive. Patty, let's start.
To prove there are good Colorado Republicans, a shout out to Rick Enstrom, who has a horrible case of West Nile. Almost killed him. Great leader, great candy maker, good guy. So he was our cover story last week. Good luck to him.
Yes, definitely.
Well said, Patty, and read the cover story in Westward. Well done. Well done story. I'm going to give it, this is a week or 10 days old, I'm going to give it to Colorado Congressman Jason Crow. He took a lot of heat. He was on a phone call with the president, with Joe Biden, before Biden had made a decision to get out. Jason Crow asked some tough questions which aroused the president's anger, and the president pushed back very hard. But good for Jason Crow for doing what a congressman ought to do and look out for more than the individual, look out for the good of the nation and the good of his party.
Okay, Elena.
The Summer Olympic Games kick off this weekend in Paris, and there are more than 24 Coloradans who are competing. So I'm really excited to tune in and cheer them on.
Couldn't come at a better time.
Yeah,
Don't you agree?
yeah, we need
yeah.
it.
Can't wait to see Celine Dion too, right? At the opening
amazing.
ceremonies.
My high of the week is a company called Rocky Talkie, which is a backcountry radio company out of Denver, and the American Alpine Club in Golden just gave $25,000 to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison Search and Rescue team. They performed an amazing rescue of a hiker that had fallen in the Black Canyon on the Great White Wall, and they had to go down 1,800 feet to go get her. And they did it. They were also aided by Western Colorado University, their search and rescue team. So money will go towards training, developing that team in a greater sense, and really that park needs them.
Excellent. That's great. My high is an open invitation to attend a special edition of Colorado Inside Out and be part of a live audience on Monday, August 5th. That is a week from this coming Monday. We are talking about Social Security. All of your working life, you've had money taken out of your checks that one day you would have when you retire, but the funds from the Social Security benefits, from which the benefits are paid, that fund is expected to go dry in about 10 years. So let's talk about what can be done. We have more information on PBS 12's website, so we hope to fill as many of you as possible in the King Center on the Auraria campus. We'll have more details throughout the week as well. Thank you, this week's insiders, for coming on and talking about all that has happened this week. And thank you for being engaged and watching along with us or listening to our podcast on Spotify and Apple. I'm Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12. In the meantime, go cheer on Team USA as we start off the Summer Olympics.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.